Welcome to the Pancake King Life and Marriage on the Spectrum, your source for everything autism and marriage on the autism spectrum. I'm your host, Forrest, and this is a faceless episode because, once again, my wife, KG, is with me in this episode because she doesn't like showing her face. So if you wanted to type in the comments and go, I don't like the fact that this is a faceless episode, sorry, it's a faceless one. Audio only.
You should say, you're a place for all things autism and autistic marriage.
An autistic marriage. I think I have at some point. Okay, let me be honest. Let me be straight and honest about something once in a while. I don't always script my introductions. I script most of my episodes. I do not script my introductions a lot. And then sometimes I'll just repeat so I'll make up an intro on the fly, right? At the beginning of an episode. And then when I'm ready to write a script for another episode, I just take what I said before in a previous introduction and just write it into the script. And I'm like, okay, I guess that'll do.
Or you could do autism and autism accessories.
Yeah, I guess.
from King of the Hill.
Right.
Propane and propane accessories.
Yeah. Speak into the microphone, friends. Speak more into the microphone.
I am speaking into the microphone.
So, I was at work today, and KG texted me and said, hey, I have an idea for a podcast episode. And in conclusion, here we are.
Yes.
So you came up with a suggestion for the title, Why Autistic People Want to Be Left Alone.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that you wanted to share your experiences in 8th grade,
yes.
And that's the reason why you came up with the suggestion for the title. So I take it that you have a story to share, and I'll be perfectly honest, I may only have a vague idea of what that story is. But that's what KG is here tonight for, is to tell us a story, apparently. So I really don't know any other better way to start except can you, start us off on our story, beautiful?
I have no ill feelings toward the school for what happened because this was 1 year out of 10 that I spent there, and the other 9 years were amazing. And
okay.
I had a very good quality education while I was there, and it served me well served me well throughout my life, and I learned way more things than I did in public school.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, everything will remain nameless, but this was a private Christian school, very small private Christian school. There were only maybe 200 to 250 students.
Yeah.
And that's important because it was a, very close, tight-knit, community in the school where, everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
Type thing, because we were so small.
Right.
But yeah, this happened in 8th grade because the summer going from 7th to 8th grade was when I got diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
No, it happened. I got tested, middle of 7th grade.
Uh-huh.
And then I got told about the diagnosis in the summer.
You got told. Yes. Okay.
So my parents knew for about 6 months.
Right.
But, they were trying to figure out, how do we break it to her? They were doing research themselves and stuff like that.
I didn't realize that it took a while before they told you after you were diagnosed.
Oh, no. They had me read a book first.
Oh. And here, child, we have something very big to reveal to you, but first we need you to read this book.
No, first they were like, hey, I think you should read this book. I think you'd really like it. That type of thing. And it was this really short book, maybe 30 pages long type book, where it was just this short story about this kid who had autism.
Mm-hmm.
And, a story of him learning about it, that typical, this is autism book.
Right,
for kids.
Yeah.
And then and then after I read it, I'm like, and they asked me, what do you think of it? And I'm like, it was a good book. And they're like, okay, well, you know how the character has autism? You have autism.
Yeah, that's what you have, kid. That kid in the book has the same thing that you have.
Uh-huh.
Are you letting that sink in, kid? and you're like, honestly, I was just sort of distracted by the fact that he was dancing around butterflies on the cover. It's just this little boy in overalls dancing around in a field of flowers with butterflies flying around him.
No.
And the title says A is for autist.
I actually don't remember what the book was called. We have to ask my parents. But that's how
A is for amateur.
Yeah, that's how they told me.
That's interesting. You know, I've made it very clear in a recent episode that I was told through my 20-page long diagnosis report. Very raw data.
I was 13, so I was
Yeah.
younger. I was more delicate.
Hey, I just recently read your diagnosis report. It's right here.
Yes.
Right in front of me. Continue.
Yeah. So, after that, this was around the time when like autism. By the way, I wasn't technically diagnosed with autism. I was diagnosed with Asperger's, which was later got shoved together with autism into
Right.
autism spectrum disorder. But so at the time the idea was Asperger's is like autism, but it's not autism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what my parents kept telling me is it's kind of like autism, but it's technically not autism.
See, so you were diagnosed back when they used the term Asperger's. Before autism was lumped into before Asperger's was lumped into autism. Before autism was lumped into vaccine affected, according to RFK Jr.
Yeah, basically. So what we'd call Asperger's now is just high functioning.
Mm-hmm.
So for those that are unfamiliar with Asperger's, because it doesn't really exist anymore, high functioning. I was diagnosed high functioning.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this was around the time when that was kind of new. People were like, autism was starting to become a more mainstream thing. Like, more people were talking about it. More schools were getting exposed to it. Like, hey, this is a thing. A lot of kids are affected by it and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was basically the first autistic kid in the school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there may have been more before me, but I was the first that was like properly diagnosed. And like, so my parents were like really fired up about spreading the word about it because it's important. It's very important to it was very important at the time to spread the word about this so that we could spread awareness, get people help if they need it, help parents understand it, and maybe see signs in their kids so that they can get diagnosed.
Right.
So they gave an entire presentation to like every single teacher and staff at the school to like right before 8th grade started.
Yeah.
So like teachers would understand what it is, so they could know what I needed and how to like interact with me, how I might need extra help in some areas and stuff like that. So very important stuff. And but this does kind of tie in to what happened. And my parents were really wanted me to socialize.
Right.
In 8th grade. That's why they signed me up for volleyball, even though I hated it.
Uh-huh.
Because they're like, hey, you need to get out there. You need to make more friends. You need to get people on your side and stuff like that. You need to find friends that you can trust to talk about your autism and stuff.
Right.
I really didn't want to.
Yeah.
But everybody around you was all like, hey, you need to do this. This will really help you. And you're first exposed to this.
Yeah.
You're first exposed to this, and you don't know what's really going on. And again, at the time, this was new, so my parents were still trying to figure things out too. But they were really insistent that I make friends, find someone you can trust to break the news to them first. That's what they literally wanted me to do.
Yeah.
Pick someone from your class that you feel like you can trust to tell and explain what's going on, because it's important to have allies, as they would call it. So I did. I told someone that, and to clarify, my class was 12 kids, including me, at the time. It was pretty small, and most of us had been around each other since kindergarten.
Right.
So we were really tight-knit. We've known each other for years. And so I picked this one girl out of my class, and I explained to her, hey, I'm autistic, or
Yeah.
I have Asperger's, and
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is what this means, and I'd appreciate it though if you didn't tell anyone right now, because I'm still trying to get used to it, but I really wanted you to know, so I could talk to you about it and stuff, so I know that someone's there. And so I did that, and I think at this time I was also going to therapy, and so I was, so I was learning how to socialize and stuff, and, well, anyway, like, I can't remember how long it was after I told her that one of my other classmates coming up to me when we were, like, switching classes and going to a different classroom, and she said, hey, I heard you were autistic.
Someone told someone.
Yeah. And, back then there was that whole stigma of, you remember what, like, autism used to mean.
Yeah.
Like, there was a specific picture people had,
Yeah.
and that was low functioning,
Right.
or you're dumb, or you're retarded.
Yes.
Mentally-
we use it's okay. It's okay to use the word retarded around here.
Yeah, you're mentally challenged.
Yes.
Basically,
Yeah.
you belong in the special needs area.
Right.
That's what people. That was the stigma that was attached.
Yeah.
So that's what my classmates, I should say, thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to literally tell her, no, I'm not autistic. I have Asperger's.
Right.
'Cause again,
right.
that's what I was diagnosed with. Technically, it's the same thing, but again, we didn't know that it wasn't lumped in at that point.
Yeah.
So that was like the first sign that something was happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then my therapist, I believe, had brought up, I can't remember if it was my therapist or my mom, or maybe it was because she would talk to my therapist alone after our sessions, just to, like, parent therapist time.
Yeah.
And maybe she got the idea from a therapist. I can't remember, but the idea came about of like, because I have problems with loud noises,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they were like, well, is it really loud for you in the lunchroom? And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of loud, but it's kind of loud. And they were like, would you prefer it if you were not in the lunchroom? And I'm like, sure. And so they were like, hey, why don't we talk to the school and see if you can eat lunch by yourself? And maybe you can invite some of your classmates to eat with you, and that would help you practice socializing and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, cool, let's do that. And looking back on it, maybe that was just like me thinking, oh, this is special treatment. That's pretty cool. And that's why I really wanted it, because I'd been in the lunchroom for years. Never really had a problem, honestly.
Yeah.
So I don't know if half of it was like, I don't know if it was mostly like, oh, special privileges. I get to do something no one else gets to do. And,
Yeah.
because you're 13.
Right.
You're young. You want to feel special.
Right.
And so I'm kind of sometimes I think back on that time, and I'm like, was I really wanting to be alone? Was I really thinking about my loud noise sensitivity?
Sure.
Or was I just wanting special treatment?
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't think we'll ever know.
I mean, I was still pretty well accommodating, I think in a good way.
Yeah, but it's just like, did I myself really want that for the wrong reasons?
Sure, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. And so we arranged it, and I arranged for a couple of classmates to eat with me during lunch. But I began to notice that even though I invited them to eat with me to, like, help me practice socializing, they wouldn't talk to me. They would talk to themselves, and they really wouldn't include me.
Sure.
In the conversation.
Sure.
I think it also didn't help that they talked about stuff that I really was not interested in.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
And we went to different churches at the time. So there was that. They would talk about youth group a lot, and I didn't go to that youth group.
Yeah.
So there was that. So I just kind of felt left out after a while. And I eventually brought this up to my therapist, and she's like, well, if they're not interacting with you, you can tell them to leave.
Right.
That's totally up to you.
Right.
And so I did, but in my very blunt, honest
Oh,
way,
no.
where I literally wrote them a note
Oh,
and
no.
posted on the door.
Oh, no.
Cause you know me, I'm not good with like talk confrontations.
Yeah.
And so
You've gotten better.
I've gotten better, but at the time, I was still very, very socially awkward.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I really don't want to say that to them into their faces. But
Mm-hmm.
like, because it's that social anxiety of they're just gonna, of that like piercing stare of them just like looking at you.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, and then it's awful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that. And then, of course, they never came back. And I did tell the headmaster before that I was going to ask them to leave.
Yeah, yeah.
And stuff like that. Oh, I don't know if I told them or if like my family informed the headmaster.
Right.
And so that was like the second thing.
The worst thing was the third thing. I have no idea.
It was at that point that I that I kind of learned something. That I kind of learned this lesson that's kind of stuck with me for better or for worse throughout my entire life.
Sure.
Where the lesson was, you're different.
Mm-hmm.
And if you tell people you're different, they're going to treat you different.
That is true. I mean, I've had experience with that. The funny thing is, I don't even have to tell people that I'm on the autism spectrum. People just have. When I say people, I mean like some people that I've encountered that I don't talk to anymore. So, anyone who's listening to this and wondering, is that me? It's not you. If you're listening to this, because I guarantee you, anybody who has done this with me is not listening to this.
Well,
But
I should clarify that the beginning, like the lesson was like starting to like hit me, but it didn't really hit me until the third thing, like you said.
Well, yeah, before we get into the third thing, I was just gonna say that like there's a certain way that that people in the past have like talked to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't even have to tell them that I'm autistic. They just kind of get the impression pretty quickly that I'm different, and they talk to me in a way that's different from the way they talk to everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing just annoys me faster. Like, one of the things that annoys me the fastest is when people talk to me differently than the way they talk to everyone else.
Actually, no, like, I mix it up. Like, the lesson I learned after that is, special privileges, accommodations, like they ostracize you. That's what I learned from that. Like, you shouldn't want special privileges because if you invite people into them, they're just gonna take advantage of it.
Sure.
And it ostracized you because I still ate by myself alone. I didn't interact I didn't go to the lunchroom at all that year.
Sure.
And I just felt kind of ostracized. Like,
sure.
It was that feeling you get when you get to go do something else that no one else gets to do, and you just feel them staring at you. Yeah.
So what was the third thing then?
The third thing happened in during a lesson in class. It was in 8th grade. We actually were reading Watership Down, and our teacher in English, and our teacher wanted to have us compare and contrast the story of Watership Down with Lost. So we ended up watching like most of the first season of Lost.
Funny, yeah.
And so this was during one of the times where we were going to watch Lost. And so she brought on the TV, and then she left the classroom. I don't remember why, but she was gone for a little bit. And so I had this habit when I was younger. I forced myself out of it because of what happened.
Yeah.
But I had this habit where when I would sit on the ground, I would bring my knees to my chest, and I would just kind of hug them and like rock back and forth. Repetitive movement. That's what autistic people like, repetitive movement. It's self-soothing.
Right.
And so I was doing that, and everybody around me just kept saying, "Hey, don't do that." And I answered, "Why? I'm not doing anything. I'm not bothering you. I'm just doing this. I'm just rocking back and forth."
Yeah.
And they're like, "No, stop it. You're annoying." And I'm like, "No, I'm not," because
And you probably had a smile on your face, right?
I might have.
Am I right?
I might have. I don't remember.
Mouth full of braces.
I might have. I don't remember. I just remember not really looking at everybody. Just like, kind of like curling in on myself. But,
Sure.
but we're stubborn, and in my mind, I'm like, I'm not bothering you, and you don't have to look at me.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept doing it, and then they started pushing me over.
Yeah.
And so, but I was always taught, don't listen to that. So I get back up and I just go back right to it, and they push me over again. And then some of them started hitting me really hard in the back, and I mean like really like slapping. And that just kept happening for a little bit until the teacher finally came in, and she saw that and she broke it up. Nothing really came of that though.
Sure.
I don't remember why. I just remember that nothing really came about it until I told my therapist that it happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And then my mom was in the room with me, and that was the first time she heard of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was also around that time that I told them that the girls hadn't really been interacting with me during lunchtime, and then they were like super serious about this.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were like, that's not right. What just happened and isn't right. And so I told them what had happened. They asked me names of the kids who were pushing me over and hitting me. And it was a big thing. Like, this was like scandal level in the school. Like, this was, it was bad. Like, there were threats of expulsion for some of these kids. Like, the threat was real that they were going to get kicked out.
Jeez. And
there was one of them who kept claiming that they weren't doing it. And I was, even though I had named them, and I'm like, and I eventually said, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I misremembered. And I remember my therapist like going into like this whole thing about what bullying is like. Like, you have the victim, you have the bully, you have the bystanders.
Yes.
Stuff like that. So that was interesting.
Yeah. So what,
And that was when, if the first lesson was special privileges and accommodations are not good because they ostracize you, and if you involve people that are neurotypical, they're just going to take advantage of it and not care about you. But this is where I learned the lesson of, for better or for worse, you're different, and if you're different, people won't like you, even if you've known them for years. As soon as you have a label on you, you're different. And they'll treat you differently. And so after that, it was just kind of a tense situation all around.
Sure.
I remember me and my dad went to go talk to the father of one of the girls, and the girl herself, like one of the main instigators at Panera. And so it was to kind of like,
oh no,
it was to kind of like,
I love going to Panera, but not for that.
But it was to kind of like, men broken bridges and stuff like that, and like get, and air out everything, come to a truce basically.
Yeah.
And so after that, it was just kind of a really, really tense situation where I just felt alone throughout the entire rest of 8th grade.
Sure. But 9th grade was better, right?
Yeah, I moved schools.
Okay, yeah.
That was part of the reason why I eventually left that school. And again, I love that school. It was great. Except for that.
It was great, except for everything else.
And I do want to shout out my art teacher. She was like the MVP that year. She was on it. She understood everything. She had my back the entire time. Like, she even, as soon as she found out and she learned about like how autistic people could get overstimulated, she went up to me and was like, hey, if you ever feel overstimulated during my class, I just want you to come up to me and say, I need a drink of water, and I will let you go and like calm down, wind down for as long as you need. So I want to shout out her. She was like one of the best teachers I ever had that year.
That's awesome.
And
that's
also
fantastic.
And also shout out to the teacher who let me eat in her classroom during lunch that entire year.
Yeah, I think you did tell me that before.
Yeah, she was awesome. We had some great conversations, just me and her. that was another thing I realized back then, is that I really get along better with like adults.
Sure.
I did my own
I did too.
classmates.
I mean, seriously, well, I did too. When I was a kid, I actually had the tendency to strike up full-blown conversations with older people.
Yeah.
You know, that was something that my parents noticed.
Yeah. So after that whole year, as soon as I moved schools to a public school, that's when I took those lessons that I learned and I applied them, and I never told anyone except for like some teachers that kind of like needed to know.
Mm-hmm.
Because my mom insisted, and so I never told anyone, and I rarely tell people nowadays that I'm autistic. No one at work knows except for maybe like one person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you know who I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, I know.
And your friends didn't know for like months. 'Cause I didn't want to tell them.
Yeah.
And
I told you that I just felt the need to tell them just in case something serious happened and there needed to be context.
sure,
You know?
and then, but yeah, throughout my entire high school life and all the jobs I've had,
Because you don't hide autism very well.
yeah,
you know.
I try.
Yeah. But like I wanted to touch on you just mentioned the lessons though. It's like you know, like the one about like how neurotypical people will like treat you differently no matter what, if you like kind of announce your label, like are you saying like in short, to put it in short, you saying the lesson is neurotypical people suck?
I wouldn't say suck. It's just that that's the title is why autistic people want to be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons, because even you said it. They treat you differently, and maybe they're not. I don't think they're trying to. It's not like they're being mean, like eighth grade, like my eighth grade class. It's not like they're bullying you, but they treat you differently.
I can go. I actually plan on doing a future podcast episode where I kind of go more into the fact that autistic people don't want to, you know, get as much attention or be, you know, or be, I guess you could say, be paraded around like other kinds of groups of people are, like different people groups. You know, they don't, you know, essentially they don't, to kind of give a hint of what's to come. They don't want the Pride Month treatment.
Right. You have kind of helped me at least like be more open about it. I wasn't really open about it until you came along.
You wouldn't have had a conversation like this
No.
on with a mic in front of you.
No.
Like that just would not have happened.
No. But this was before I met you. I remember my parents asked me one day, because they noticed that I hadn't been really telling people, and I was kind of telling them, "Hey, don't tell them, okay, please." And they were like, "Are you ashamed of being autistic? Is that why you don't want to tell people?"
And by your parents asked you that, you mean your dad. It sounds so much like something your dad would ask.
I think it was technically both of them. It was a conversation we were having, and I'm like,
okay.
And I thought about it, and I'm like, I'm not. And this is inner thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ashamed of it. I just don't want to talk about it.
Sure.
And I feel like that's been my motto ever since. I'm not ashamed of who I am. I just don't want to talk about it.
Not all autistic people talk about, you know, their autism.
I can go days without thinking about it.
I mean, hey, actually, the funny thing is, despite the fact that I have a podcast about it, so can I.
Yeah, like when I don't talk to people about it, and I can mask myself as just this, because that's what they refer to as acting normal as masking.
Mm-hmm.
And when I mask around other people, throughout high school, I'm pretty sure people just thought I was just the weird, quirky, eccentric girl.
Sure.
Because I never told them, and they didn't ask.
Yeah. And actually, I should say this too, like to kind of capitalize on the whole like I don't talk about autism. I don't even think about autism every day. Is that like autism? Yes, I talk about it in this show. That's what this podcast is for. But I want to emphasize the fact that it's not the only thing I want to talk about. There are so many cases where I have come dangerously close in this podcast to just completely veering off into different directions that have nothing to do with autism. And then you add a footnote at the end and say, what this has to do with autism. And you come up with some like bullcrap like explanation. And yeah, it's not the only thing that I want to talk about. It's not the only thing that I want to push, I guess you could say, content for.
Yeah. The moral of my story is like
the moral of the story.
The moral of the story is
don't end up like me.
the moral of the story, I guess, is that don't let other people treat your autism like a label.
Yeah, because in your personal experience, it's never really benefited you. It's never really worked for you.
Yeah, like, or I should, and also don't let other people treat your autism like a label.
So what compels you to share the story now of all times?
It's been enough time, and some people, and they do say, like, if you talk about your traumatic experiences, it helps you heal from it.
Sure. No, that's fair.
Yeah. I was gonna say something else. Man, I lost it. It was so profound.
Oh no! But I love ending on profound things.
I remember what it was.
Go.
It was relating to like my experiences. It's like I want to remind everybody that I had known these people for years. We had gotten along pretty well. We had known each other since kindergarten.
Yeah.
Like we were all basically friends. And the moment that they learned I was different, it was like none of that mattered.
Sure.
So, and again, that's another reason why I never really talk about it or tell people about it, because I'm like, I don't want to be friends with someone, and then I feel like I can trust them enough to tell them that I'm autistic, and then because I'm afraid that they'll just flip. I will not necessarily that they'll and that they'll be like mean or cut me off, but just like they'll treat me differently.
I knew you were autistic before I even met you, so it's
You're
like
different.
you didn't
You're
even
already autistic.
Right, I know, but you didn't have to go through the trouble of having a conversation with me about it, because I already knew before I even met you.
Yeah, that's why I was so like nervous talking, like when you said you wanted to tell your friends.
That's right. Yeah.
I even had you do it because I didn't want to, because I don't like confrontation.
You were nervous about just talking about autism with me the first time we met. You bolted down that hallway, like, yeah, you wanted almost nothing to do with it. Wearing that coat that apparently belonged to your mother and I've never seen you wear again, and I miss it.
Which one?
I don't know. It's a black coat that you said belonged to your mother and you were wearing it.
Oh yeah, the black one.
I remember when we had each other's numbers and you were the one who asked, like, if we could have, like, exchange phone numbers.
Yeah.
Because we had our email addresses first. And then you asked me if we could exchange phone numbers because it would just be easier to talk that way. And I remember I was walking down the hallway in Black Hawk College talking to one of my edgy friends there, one of my edgy college friends that I don't see anymore. And you texted me and you asked me if I was going to be at the comedy club for that, because a local autism group was going to that comedy club. I think it was Comedy Sports.
Yeah, it was Comedy Sports.
And you asked me if I was going just because your parents were basically pushing you to go. And the only way that you would feel comfortable with going is if you knew that I would be there.
Yeah.
It was adorable. I don't know. I just remember
we were friends by that point. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wasn't really interested. I don't think I was interested in dating you at the time. It was like, oh, this chick is asking me if I'll be at the comedy club. Cool. But yeah, it's just something I remember in the before times.
Like, do you have any questions about my story?
Not really. I mean, part of it I've already heard, but was there anything that you would want to add? Anything that you would want to
not really
go into more detail about?
Not really. Not that I can think of. It was just
yeah.
I
mean, this one is tough to sort of.
Well, I thought about it because you always talk about how you want to be a bit more unconventional, and I'm like, hey, what's more unconventional than talking about a bullying experience and about hey, there's actual people out there that have autism and don't want to talk about it.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah. So don't pressure people.
Yeah, they don't want the kind of attention. I mean, honestly, the other people groups, don't want the same kind of attention that culture gives them. And I think we autistic people are certainly the types of people who would just rather be left alone. I think I was saying that, I was like, that's that's kind of been my message or my vision with talking about autism on the podcast is I'm trying to bring more awareness about the autism spectrum while simultaneously saying, please stop, like putting this everywhere.
Yeah, because
It's a weird, it's a weird like
you can spread awareness.
balancing act.
You can spread awareness without pressuring people to talk about it.
Absolutely. Like if you feel better informed by what I say, and if you learn things from what I say, great. I don't need you though setting up parades in our honor and waving blue flags. I don't need that. I don't want that, and neither do a lot of autistic people.
I think it took a while for my parents to realize that, because they always kept trying to be like, hey, these people are autistic, you should go make friends with them, and I'm just like, hey, maybe you should tell
Yeah,
us.
and I'm just over here like, I already have a friend. It's my autism.
My autism was there for me when no one else was.
Yes. Well, I'm glad that you shared your story anyway, and apparently your takeaways.
My takeaways is don't pressure people. And if you really don't want to tell people that you're autistic, it's perfectly okay.
I mean,
or it's like the old drug PSAs. Don't tell people that you're autistic, or you'll end up like me.
I feel like I could say the same thing.
You'll end up with trauma.
You'll end up with the pressure of creating content that is exclusively catered towards people who are interested in the subject. Oh my Lord. Well, thank you, for sharing the story. Thank you for sharing the story, honey. That was great.
Yeah.
And I want to say this before we wrap, like for the third time. This isn't meant if you are, and I know
it's not fear mongering.
No, not fear mongering, guilt tripping.
Yeah, guilt tripping.
Because I know there are people who listen to the podcast who are older than me, who have autistic grandchildren, and they care very much for them, and they find value in listening to this show. And we're not pulling a joke or two here. We don't hate you. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to guilt trip you and say, like, don't do anything about your child or your grandchild's autism. Don't even mention it to them. Don't even think about it in relation to them. That's not what we're saying. What we're ultimately saying is, their autism is absolutely a part of them, and it will have some effect on their lives that they will have to, make accommodations for, or
not. If they don't want
if
they don't want the accommodations, don't pressure
if the
them.
accommodations aren't needed, essentially, like
I went all through high school. I ate in the lunchroom. I did not leave. I did not have a special area for myself.
We don't need to tape pillows around them, like they really can live some, for the most part, pretty normal lives. It may take them longer to reach independence in certain areas. It took me longer to reach independence in certain areas. It took me forever to finally get my driver's license.
My dad forced independence on me.
Oh yeah, it's like, you don't want independence? Well, you're gonna have it.
Well, he was just like, you're not gonna call me when you're in college asking how do I do this.
You're not gonna call me asking for money. Yes. So, like, obviously love them, cherish them, be there for them when they're needed, but
don't pressure them into doing things that they may not even want.
Because they don't. Let's just say, we don't do well under pressure.
No, I think maybe that was another reason why I was agreeing to like the accommodations. Because I'm like, everybody was like, oh, this will be so good for you. You can be by yourself. You don't have to hear the loud noises. And I'm just sitting here like, yeah,
great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, sweetie, for sharing the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that you guys.
And again, I don't hate the adults. The disclaimer: I don't hate the adults or the students or anybody else involved in the story, because this was new. It just wasn't the best environment to spring on.
Sure.
To spring all this stuff on.
That's fair.
it was because it was new. No one really knew about it. No one really understood it. If this happened today, completely different story.
Right. Absolutely.
Completely different story.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely have some ideas for later episodes I'm going to be doing, which I've already hinted at in this episode.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that you shared the story, and I hope that you guys learned something from this as well. Obviously, you can leave a comment in the comment section if you strongly disagree with us, or if you want to share your own personal stories. Growing up in school with autism, we would love to read them and hear them. We value those very much. And we love knowing that there are other people out there who share those common experiences. So, with that being said, thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.